My life had become undeniably intertwined with ChatGPT. It wasn't just a novelty or a productivity tool. It was practically an extension of my own problem-solving abilities. From crafting eloquent emails to deciphering complex legal jargon, ChatGPT had proven its worth time and time again. One area where I found it particularly invaluable was managing the logistical nightmares of modern life, especially the recurring headache of prescription refills and deliveries. I relied on a medication for a chronic condition, a controlled substance that, while essential for my well-being, also carried a heavy weight of anxiety. The refills were always a dance of phone calls, doctor's approvals, and pharmacy confirmations. Then came the nail-biting wait for the package, a constant tracking ritual fueled by the fear of loss, theft, or, frankly, any kind of mishap. It wasn't just about the inconvenience. It was about the very real possibility of withdrawal symptoms and the disruption of my carefully managed health. The pharmacy I used offered discreet packaging and reliable tracking, which was a considerable comfort. They understood the sensitivity of the situation, the need for absolute security. Each delivery felt like a minor victory against the forces of chaos. But even with all the precautions, a persistent unease lingered. It wasn't paranoia, I told myself. It was simply acknowledging the reality of living in a world where things could, and often did, go wrong. And in my neighborhood, nestled within the manicured lawns and meticulously maintained flower beds of the Hawthorne Crest HOA, things had a tendency to go particularly wrong, usually involving one particularly enthusiastic resident. Hawthorne Crest was, on the surface, the epitome of suburban tranquility, but beneath the veneer of perfectly trimmed hedges and matching mailboxes lay a simmering cauldron of petty grievances and power struggles, all orchestrated, it seemed, by a woman we'd all affectionately and secretly dubbed Karen. She was the self-appointed guardian of community standards, the enforcer of arbitrary rules, the bane of every homeowner who dared to leave their trash cans out for an extra hour or park their car an inch over the designated line. Her real name was Deborah, but Karen just seemed to fit better. She had a knack for appearing at the most inopportune moments, armed with a clipboard and a pursed lip expression that could curdle milk. She was a master of passive-aggressive notes, a champion of anonymous complaints, and a general thorn in the side of everyone who valued peace and quiet. And, as fate would have it, she lived just 3 houses down from me. Naturally. The combination of my anxiety about my medication deliveries and the presence of our resident Karen created a perfect storm of apprehension. I'd often imagined scenarios where she'd intercept my package, mistaking it for something else, or simply out of spite. It seemed absurd, of course, but with Deborah, absurdity was always a distinct possibility. The thought of her prying into my personal medical information, fueled by her insatiable curiosity and unwavering sense of entitlement, made my skin crawl. That's why I relied on ChatGPT so much. It helped me stay organized, keep track of everything, and formulate clear, concise communications with the pharmacy and delivery service. It was my digital shield against the potential for Deborah-induced chaos. I even used it to draft polite but firm responses to her occasional HOA-related emails, carefully worded to avoid escalating any unnecessary conflicts. I just wanted my medication to arrive safely and without incident. Was that really too much to ask in a civilized society? Apparently. In Hawthorne Crest, it was, because on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday morning, my worst fears were about to be realized. The tracking information for my package showed a deviation, a detour that sent a shiver of dread down my spine. It wasn't delivered to my door. It was somewhere else, and I had a very strong feeling I knew exactly where. Tuesday had started like any other Tuesday. I woke up, checked my emails. ChatGPT had already filtered out the spam, bless its digital heart, and brewed a cup of coffee. But there was an underlying hum of anticipation. Today was the day my prescription refill was scheduled to arrive. I'd been meticulously tracking it since it left the pharmacy, a ritual that, while bordering on obsessive, provided a semblance of control over a situation that often felt anything but. Around 10 a.m., I refreshed the tracking page on the delivery service's website. Out for delivery, it proclaimed in cheerful, optimistic font. A wave of relief washed over me. Almost there. I busied myself with some light housework, glancing at the window every few minutes, half expecting to see the delivery truck pull up. I even tidied the porch, removing a stray leaf and straightening the welcome mat, as if preparing for a VIP guest. Then, around 2 p.m., I checked the tracking again. My heart leaped into my throat. The status had changed. But it wasn't the update I was expecting. Instead of delivered, it read, delivery exception, redirected to alternate address. Redirected? My blood ran cold. I stared at the screen, willing the words to change, to revert to some more palatable reality. But they remained, stark and accusatory. Redirected to alternate address. What alternate address? I hadn't requested any redirection. I hadn't even considered it. Frustration began to bubble up, quickly followed by a wave of panic. This wasn't just a misplaced package. This was my medication, a controlled substance, potentially in the hands of someone else. The potential consequences were terrifying. I clicked on the details link, hoping for some clarification, some explanation, anything to alleviate the growing knot of dread in my stomach. But the details were frustratingly vague. Recipient requested redirection. That was it.no name. No address, no further information, just a bland, bureaucratic statement that offered no comfort whatsoever. My mind raced. Had there been a mistake? Had the pharmacy somehow mixed up the addresses? Had the delivery driver simply made an error? Or had someone deliberately interfered? The image of Deborah, RHOA Karen, flashed into my mind. Her penchant for meddling, her insatiable curiosity, her utter disregard for personal boundaries, it all pointed in one direction. I immediately called the delivery service. After navigating a labyrinthine phone menu and enduring several minutes of elevator music, I finally reached a customer service representative. I explained the situation, my voice tight with anxiety. The representative, while polite, was maddeningly unhelpful. She could see that the package had been redirected, but she couldn't tell me who had requested the redirection or to what address it had been sent. For security reasons, she explained. Security reasons? What about my security? What about the security of my medication? The irony was almost unbearable. I hung up, feeling defeated and increasingly desperate. I then called the pharmacy, bracing myself for another round of bureaucratic hurdles. The pharmacist, bless her soul, was slightly more sympathetic, but ultimately no more helpful. She confirmed that the address on file was correct and that she had no record of any redirection request. She suggested I contact the delivery service again. I wanted to scream. I felt trapped in a Kafkaesque nightmare, a bureaucratic maze with no exit. My medication was somewhere out there, lost in the system, potentially falling into the wrong hands, and all I could do was wait and worry and try to navigate the maddeningly opaque world of package delivery logistics. As the minutes ticked by, my anxiety ratcheted up another notch. I paced the floor, replaying the events of the past few days in my mind, searching for any clue, any indication of what might have gone wrong. And each time, my thoughts returned to Deborah, the HOA Karen, the queen of chaos and Hawthorne Crest. It was time to take matters into my own hands. It was time to unleash the power of ChatGPT. The thought of Deborah, RHOA Karen, wasn't a comforting one. But as the reality of the situation sunk in, she was the only explanation that made any twisted sense. It wasn't just a gut feeling. It was a culmination of years of observing her unique brand of neighborhood management. Deborah wasn't content with simply enforcing the HOA rules. She seemed to derive genuine pleasure from wielding her self-appointed authority. Her reign of terror, though often petty, was relentless. There was the time she left a strongly worded note on my car for allegedly parking too close to the curb, even though there were no marked parking spaces. Then there was the incident with my hanging flower baskets, which she deemed unsuitable for the neighborhood aesthetic, despite their being perfectly within HOA guidelines. She even complained about the color of my front door, claiming it clashed with the overall harmony of the street. But it wasn't just the rule-following that defined her. It was the nosiness, the constant surveillance, the blatant disregard for personal privacy. She seemed to know everything that was going on in the neighborhood, from who was receiving packages to what time people were taking out their trash. It was as if she had a network of informants, or perhaps she simply spent her days peering through her curtains, cataloging every detail of our lives. I remembered one particularly unsettling incident a few months back. I had received a package containing a new laptop. I brought it inside immediately, but apparently, Deborah had seen the delivery truck. Later that day, she stopped me while I was checking my mail. "Oh, I saw you got a new computer," she said, her eyes gleaming with an unsettling curiosity. "What kind is it? Do you like it?" The invasiveness of the question took me aback. It wasn't just friendly neighborly interest. It felt like an interrogation. How did she even know it was a computer? Had she been watching me? Had she been waiting for the delivery truck? The whole encounter left me feeling deeply uneasy, and it wasn't just me. Other neighbors had similar stories. Sarah, who lived across the street, had received a stern warning from Deborah about her excessive water usage. Based on Deborah's observations of her sprinkler system, Mark, who lived next door, had been reprimanded for leaving his garage door open for too long, even though he was actively working in his garage at the time. Deborah's behavior wasn't just annoying. It was often bordering on harassment, but because her actions were usually couched in the language of HOA compliance and community standards, it was difficult to challenge her directly. Complaining to the HOA management was usually futile. They seemed reluctant to get involved in what they considered neighborly disputes. So we all just endured her, trying to avoid her as much as possible, whispering about her behind her back, and secretly fantasizing about the day she would finally move away. But now, with my medication package missing, Deborah's past behavior took on a new, sinister light. It wasn't just about petty annoyances and boundary violations anymore. This felt different. This felt personal. The thought of her intercepting my package, knowing exactly what it contained, and deliberately causing me distress. It made my blood boil. It was a violation of my privacy, a threat to my health, and a blatant act of malice. I knew I couldn't prove anything, not yet. But in my heart, I knew she was involved. The redirection, the secrecy, the lack of information, it all pointed to her. And if she was responsible, I was determined to hold her accountable. It was time to stop being passive. It was time to fight back. And with ChatGPT by my side, I was ready to wage war on the HOA Karen. My initial calls to the delivery service and the pharmacy had yielded nothing but frustration. Politeness had gotten me nowhere. It was time to escalate. But how? That's where ChatGPT came in. I needed to craft a series of emails, each escalating in tone and urgency, while still maintaining a semblance of professionalism. I fed ChatGPT all the details, the tracking number, the date of the expected delivery, the frustrating lack of information from customer service, and my growing concern about the controlled nature of the medication. ChatGPT generated a draft email to the delivery service. It was polite but firm, demanding an immediate investigation into the redirection and a clear explanation of why I hadn't been notified. It also included a veiled threat of legal action if the matter wasn't resolved promptly. I tweaked the email slightly, adding a personal touch to emphasize my anxiety and the potential health consequences of the misdelivery. Then, I sent it off, feeling a sliver of hope that someone, somewhere, would finally take my concerns seriously. But as the hours passed with no response, my anxiety continued to climb. I knew that every minute that went by increased the risk of my medication falling into the wrong hands, or simply being lost in the bureaucratic shuffle. I decided to try calling the pharmacy again. This time, I spoke to the head pharmacist, a woman named Mrs. Davies, who had always been incredibly helpful in the past. I explained the situation again, emphasizing the urgency and the potential legal ramifications of the misdelivery of a controlled substance. Mrs. Davies listened patiently, her voice filled with concern. She promised to look into the matter immediately and to contact the delivery service on my behalf. She also offered to speak to my doctor about potentially issuing an emergency refill. Although she cautioned that it might be difficult given the nature of the medication, that was the first glimmer of hope I had felt all day. But even with Mrs. Davies' assistance, the bureaucratic hurdles seemed insurmountable. The delivery service continued to stonewall me, citing security reasons for their refusal to provide any information. And my doctor's office was proving equally frustrating, requiring multiple phone calls and faxes to authorize the emergency refill. I felt like I was running in circles, trapped in a system designed to protect everyone but the patient. The sense of urgency was overwhelming. I knew that I couldn't afford to wait for the bureaucracy to grind its gears. I had to take matters into my own hands. Using ChatGPT, I began researching the legal implications of the misdelivery of a controlled substance. I learned about federal regulations regarding the tracking and handling of prescription narcotics, and the potential liabilities of the delivery service and the pharmacy. I also researched the laws regarding package theft and the rights of the recipient. The more I learned, the more determined I became to hold someone accountable. This wasn't just about my medication. It was about the principle of the matter. It was about the right to receive essential medical care without being subjected to bureaucratic incompetence and potential criminal activity. I drafted another email to the delivery service, this time citing specific federal regulations and outlining the potential legal consequences of their inaction that I also copied the email to the pharmacy and my doctor's office. Hoping to create a sense of urgency and accountability as I hit send, I knew that I had done everything I could through official channels. But I also knew that it might not be enough. The bureaucratic hurdles were high, and the clock was ticking. It was time to confront Deborah. ChatGPT wasn't just a tool. It was my strategic partner in this escalating crisis. Its ability to synthesize information, generate persuasive arguments, and maintain a professional tone, even when I was feeling anything but, was invaluable. It was like having a legal team and a PR firm rolled into one convenient AI package. The emails to the delivery service were a masterclass in assertive communication. I started with a simple request for information. But as the hours passed and the stonewalling continued, the tone became increasingly demanding. ChatGPT helped me articulate my frustration without resorting to outright anger, a delicate balance that was crucial for maintaining credibility. For example, one email, generated with ChatGPT's assistance, read, "While I understand the need for security protocols, the lack of transparency in this matter is unacceptable. As a customer relying on your services for the secure delivery of essential medication, I am entitled to a clear explanation of why my package was redirected and to whom. Failure to provide this information will leave me with no choice but to pursue further action, including legal remedies." It was polite, it was firm, and it made my point crystal clear. And it was all thanks to ChatGPT's ability to craft persuasive arguments. The emails to the pharmacy were equally important. I needed to keep them informed of the situation and to enlist their support in resolving the misdelivery. ChatGPT helped me draft emails that were both informative and empathetic, emphasizing the potential health consequences of the delay and the need for their immediate assistance. Point 1 email, crafted with ChatGPT's help, read. I am writing to update you on the ongoing situation regarding the misdelivery of my prescription refill. Despite my repeated attempts to contact the delivery service, I have been unable to obtain any information about the redirection of my package. As you know, this medication is essential for managing my chronic condition, and any delay in receiving it could have serious health consequences. I would greatly appreciate any assistance you can provide in resolving this matter, including contacting the delivery service on my behalf and exploring the possibility of an emergency refill. It was a delicate balance of informing them of the severity of the situation while also appealing to their sense of responsibility and compassion. And again, ChatGPT helped me strike that perfect balance. But ChatGPT's assistance wasn't limited to just the delivery service and the pharmacy. I also decided to contact the HOA management, hoping that they might be able to shed some light on Deborah's potential involvement. I knew it was a long shot, but I figured it was worth a try. ChatGPT helped me draft an email to the HOA president, outlining the situation and expressing my concern about the possibility of package theft in the neighborhood. I carefully avoided mentioning Deborah by name, but I subtly alluded to the fact that I suspected a neighbor might be involved. The email, generated with ChatGPT's assistance, read, "I am writing to report a potential incident of package theft in our community. My prescription medication, which was scheduled for delivery yesterday, was inexplicably redirected to an unknown address. Despite my attempts to contact the delivery service, I have been unable to obtain any information about the redirection. I am concerned that this may be part of a larger pattern of package theft in the neighborhood, and I urge the HOA to investigate this matter and to take steps to ensure the safety and security of our residents' deliveries." I knew it was a long shot, but I hoped that the email would at least raise some awareness about the issue and perhaps prompt the HOA to take some action. In all of these communications, ChatGPT was my invaluable assistant, helping me to articulate my concerns, demand answers, and navigate the complex world of bureaucracy and HOA politics. It was my digital advocate, my voice of reason, and my secret weapon in the fight against the HOA Karen. While waiting for responses to my emails, I decided to take a more proactive approach. I needed to gather evidence, to build a case against Deborah, however circumstantial it might be. But where to start? I was feeling overwhelmed, lost in a sea of possibilities. So I turned to ChatGPT. I explained my suspicion that Deborah was involved in the misdelivery of my package and asked for suggestions on how to gather evidence to support my claim. that I specifically requested search terms that might reveal a pattern of package thefts in the neighborhood. ChatGPT, after a few moments of processing, provided a list of targeted search terms: Hawthorne Crest HOA package theft, Hawthorne Crest missing packages, Hawthorne Crest Deborah, last name, complaints, Hawthorne Crest suspicious activity, and Hawthorne Crest HOA neighbor disputes. I started with the broadest search term, Hawthorne Crest package theft, and began sifting through the results. Initially, there was nothing, just the usual HOA-related news and community forum discussions. But then, on the third page of results, I found something. It was a post on a local neighborhood forum, titled Missing Packages on Oakwood Lane. The post, written by a user named Concerned Neighbor, described a series of recent package thefts on Oakwood Lane, which was the street directly behind mine. The user mentioned that several residents had reported missing packages, and that they suspected someone in the neighborhood was responsible. My heart leaped. This was it. This was the evidence I needed. I clicked on the post and began reading through the comments. Several other users chimed in, sharing their own experiences with missing packages. One user even mentioned seeing a suspicious woman, matching Deborah's description, lurking near their front porch on the day their package disappeared. The pieces were starting to fall into place. I then searched for Hawthorne Crest Deborah, last name, complaints, and found a few interesting results. There were several online reviews of local businesses that mentioned a woman named Deborah, last name, who had left negative reviews after experiencing minor inconveniences. There was also a post on a consumer complaint website detailing a dispute between Deborah, last name, and a local landscaping company over a billing issue. While these results weren't directly related to package theft, they did paint a picture of a woman who was prone to conflict and who had a history of making frivolous complaints. It further solidified my suspicion that Deborah was capable of the kind of malicious behavior I suspected. Finally, I searched for Hawthorne Crest HOA neighbor disputes and found a treasure trove of information. There were numerous online forum discussions and social media posts detailing various disputes between residents and the HOA, many of which involved Deborah. One particularly interesting post described a heated argument between Deborah and a neighbor over the placement of a bird feeder. The neighbor claimed that Deborah had repeatedly harassed her about the bird feeder, claiming that it was attracting unwanted pests and violating HOA rules. The post included screenshots of emails from Deborah, which were filled with passive-aggressive comments and thinly veiled threats. As I read through these posts, I began to realize that Deborah's behavior wasn't just annoying. It was potentially indicative of a deeper psychological issue. She seemed to derive pleasure from causing conflict and controlling others. Armed with this new information, I felt like I was finally making progress, that I had uncovered a potential pattern of package thefts in the neighborhood, and I had gathered evidence suggesting that Deborah was prone to conflict and suspicious behavior. It wasn't conclusive proof, but it was enough to justify a direct confrontation. It was time to put Deborah on the spot and see how she reacted. I formulated a plan, with ChatGPT's help, to confront Deborah in a way that would maximize my chances of getting her to confess. I needed to remain calm, assertive, and above all, prepared. The showdown was about to begin. Armed with my circumstantial evidence and fueled by a potent mix of anxiety and righteous indignation, I marched down the street to Deborah's house. I rehearsed my opening lines in my head, carefully crafted with ChatGPT's assistance to be both assertive and non-accusatory. I needed to keep her talking, to observe her reactions, to see if I could detect any signs of guilt. I rang her doorbell, and after a moment, she opened the door, her face etched with a look of mild annoyance. "Yes," she said, her voice dripping with the same condescension I had come to expect. "Deborah," I said, maintaining a calm and even tone, "I need to talk to you about a package that was misdelivered to my address yesterday." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice hardening. "I haven't received any packages for you. The tracking information shows that my package was redirected to an alternate address," I continued, ignoring her denial. "I've contacted the delivery service, but they're unable to provide any further information. I'm hoping you might be able to help me." "Why would I know anything about your package?" she said, her voice rising in pitch. "I have my own things to worry about." "I understand," I said, "but I know you're very observant of what goes on in the neighborhood." I was hoping you might have seen the delivery truck or noticed anything unusual." She scoffed. "I don't have time to keep track of everyone's deliveries," she said. "I'm busy." "I understand," I said again. "But this is a very important package. It contains medication that I need for a chronic condition." Her eyes flickered for a moment, a brief flash of something I couldn't quite decipher. Guilt? Surprise? Or simply annoyance? "Well, I haven't seen it," she said, her voice regaining its composure. "And I resent the implication that I would have anything to do with your missing package." "I'm not accusing you of anything, Deborah," I said. "But I do find it strange that my package was redirected without my knowledge or consent. And given your history of involvement in neighborhood affairs, I thought it was worth asking." I paused, allowing my words to sink in. Her face flushed slightly, and her hands began to tremble. "What are you implying?" she said, her voice now trembling with barely contained rage. "Are you accusing me of stealing your medication?" "I'm simply asking if you know anything about it," I said, maintaining my calm demeanor. "But since you seem so adamant that you don't, I guess I'll have to take your word for it." I turned to leave, but then I stopped and turned back to face her. "You know, Deborah," I said, "I've been doing some research and I've learned that there have been several reports of missing packages in the neighborhood recently. And I've also learned that you have a history of disputes with your neighbors." Her eyes widened, and her face turned a shade of red I had never seen before. "What are you talking about?" she stammered. "This is ridiculous." "I'm just saying," I continued, "that it's a strange coincidence, and I hope that if my package does turn up, you'll do the right thing and return it to me." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing on her doorstep, speechless with rage that I knew I hadn't gotten a confession, but I had planted a seed of doubt in her mind. And I had observed her reactions, which confirmed my suspicions. She was definitely hiding something that as I walked back to my house. I knew that the confrontation was just the beginning, that I needed to escalate the situation, to put more pressure on Deborah, to force her to crack. But how? I needed a plan, a strategy, something that would compel her to reveal the truth. And I knew exactly who to turn to for help. It was time to unleash the full power of ChatGPT. Confronting Deborah had been cathartic, but it hadn't yielded the desired result. The return of my medication, that I needed to take things to the next level, that I needed to involve the authorities. But how could I convince them to take my suspicions seriously, especially given the lack of concrete evidence? I turned to ChatGPT, explaining the situation and asking for guidance on how to approach the police. That I emphasized the controlled nature of the medication, the potential health risks associated with its absence, and my strong suspicion that Deborah was involved. That I also asked for advice on how to present my case in a way that would be most likely to elicit a positive response. ChatGPT, after analyzing the information, suggested a two-pronged approach. First, I should contact the local police department and file a formal report of package theft, emphasizing the controlled substance aspect and the potential for illegal drug diversion. Second, I should contact the DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration, as they have jurisdiction over the handling and distribution of controlled substances. ChatGPT also provided detailed information on the legal procedures involved in reporting a crime, the types of evidence that would be most helpful, and the specific language I should use when speaking to law enforcement officials. It even generated a sample police report, outlining the key facts of the case and highlighting my suspicions about Deborah. Armed with this information, I first contacted the local police department. I spoke to a detective, explaining the situation and emphasizing the urgency of the matter. Initially, the detective seemed skeptical, but as I described the controlled nature of the medication and the potential for it to be illegally diverted, his tone began to change. That I presented the circumstantial evidence I had gathered, the pattern of package thefts in the neighborhood, Deborah's history of neighbor disputes, and her suspicious behavior during our confrontation. That I also mentioned that I had contacted the DEA, which seemed to pique his interest further. The detective agreed to investigate the matter, but he cautioned that it might take some time to gather sufficient evidence to obtain a search warrant. He suggested that I try to obtain more information about the redirection of the package from the delivery service, as that would be crucial to building a strong case. Next, I contacted the DEA. I spoke to an agent, explaining the situation and emphasizing the potential for the stolen medication to be sold on the black market. The agent listened intently, asking detailed questions about the type of medication, the quantity, and the security measures employed by the pharmacy and the delivery service. The agent informed me that the DEA takes all reports of drug diversion seriously and that they would investigate the matter thoroughly. He also suggested that I consider setting up a sting operation to catch Deborah in the act at a sting operation. The idea was both exciting and terrifying that it would involve arranging for another package containing medication to be delivered to my address, with the hope that Deborah would intercept it again. The police or the DEA would then be waiting to catch her red-handed. I asked ChatGPT for advice on how to set up a sting operation, what precautions I should take, and what legal considerations I should be aware of. ChatGPT provided a detailed plan, outlining the steps I should take to ensure the success and legality of the operation. The plan involved working with the pharmacy to arrange for a dummy package containing a placebo version of my medication to be delivered to my address. The package would be equipped with a GPS tracker, allowing law enforcement to monitor its location in real time. The police or the DEA would then be stationed nearby, waiting for Deborah to make her move. It was a risky plan, but it was also the most likely way to catch Deborah and recover my medication. After careful consideration, I decided to go ahead with it. I contacted the pharmacy and the DEA, explaining my plan and requesting their assistance. Both agreed to cooperate, recognizing the potential for the sting operation to not only recover my medication, but also to uncover a larger pattern of drug diversion in the neighborhood. The bait was set. Now, all we had to do was wait. The day of the sting operation was like a scene ripped from a crime drama. The delivery truck arrived, seemingly oblivious to the undercover vehicle strategically parked down the street. I watched, hidden behind my curtains, as the driver placed the decoy package, containing a placebo, thanks to the pharmacy's cooperation, on my porch. It felt like an eternity before anything happened. Then, the GPS tracker, discreetly hidden within the package, flickered to life on my phone. The package was moving, not towards my door, but towards Deborah's. My heart pounded in my chest. This was it. I alerted the authorities, relaying the real-time location of the package. The response was immediate. Within seconds, unmarked cars swarmed Deborah's house. The ensuing arrest was swift and decisive. Uniformed officers, alongside the more subtly dressed federal agents, approached Deborah's door. I could hear their voices, amplified even through the closed windows. Police, search warrant. Deborah's initial reaction was one of indignant denial. I could practically see the steam coming out of her ears as she protested her innocence. But her protests were quickly silenced as the officers gained entry. The search was thorough. It didn't take long for them to locate the decoy package, tucked away in a hall closet. But the real bombshell came when they discovered my original package, the one containing the actual prescription narcotics, hidden beneath a pile of old newspapers in her garage. The package was unmistakably tampered with. The seal was broken, the label partially torn. And, most damningly, the pills were missing. "Ma'am," a DEA agent stated, his voice cold and professional, "are you aware of the contents of this package?" Deborah, her face ashen, stammered, I don't know what you're talking about." The agent held up the package, displaying the broken seal. "This is a controlled substance, Schedule II narcotic. Tampering with a federal delivery and illegal possession are serious offenses." The handcuffs were produced. Deborah's carefully constructed facade of suburban respectability crumbled as she was led out of her house. Her face contorted with rage, she locked eyes with my window. "You did this," she screamed, her voice shrill and filled with venom. "You'll regret this." The sight of Deborah being escorted to a police car, her reign of terror finally at an end, was immensely satisfying. But the presence of the federal agents, their serious demeanor, underscored the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just a neighborly dispute gone awry. Deborah had crossed a line, committing a federal crime that carried serious consequences. The agents remained on scene for several hours, meticulously collecting evidence and interviewing neighbors. The quiet street was buzzing with activity. The peaceful facade of Hawthorne Crest shattered as the sun began to set. The last of the vehicles pulled away, leaving behind an eerie silence. The HOA Karen had been arrested, and the power of ChatGPT in helping me navigate the legal complexities and orchestrate the sting operation had been instrumental in bringing her to justice. The aftermath of Deborah's arrest was a whirlwind. Hawthorne Crest, once a picture of suburban monotony, became the epicenter of neighborhood gossip. The story, initially whispered behind closed doors, quickly spread through social media and local news outlets. The HOA, desperate to salvage its reputation, issued a carefully worded statement condemning Deborah's actions and vowing to cooperate fully with the authorities. Deborah, stripped of her self-proclaimed authority, now faced the full weight of the legal system. The federal charges, particularly the drug diversion and mail tampering, carried significant penalties. With ChatGPT's help, I had researched the potential ramifications, and I knew she was facing a long and difficult road ahead. The legal proceedings were a protracted affair. Deborah, initially defiant, hired a team of lawyers who attempted to poke holes in the prosecution's case. They argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that Deborah had been acting erratically due to stress, and that the controlled substance aspect was being overblown. However, the prosecution, armed with the evidence from the sting operation and Deborah's own history of problematic behavior, presented a strong and compelling case. The GPS data, the tampered package, and the testimony of the DEA agents painted a clear picture of Deborah's guilt. Adding to her woes, several other neighbors came forward, sharing their own stories of Deborah's meddling and harassment. These testimonies, while not directly related to the package theft, helped to establish a pattern of behavior that painted Deborah in a decidedly unflattering light. As the trial dragged on, Deborah's legal team began to falter. Their arguments grew weaker, their defenses less convincing. Faced with the overwhelming evidence and the prospect of a lengthy prison sentence, Deborah eventually reached a plea bargain with the prosecution. She pleaded guilty to the charges of mail tampering and illegal possession of a controlled substance. In exchange, the prosecution agreed to drop the more serious charge of drug diversion. The sentencing hearing was a somber affair. The judge, after hearing statements from the prosecution, the defense, and myself, delivered a stern rebuke to Deborah. He emphasized the seriousness of her crimes, the harm she had caused to me, and the need for deterrence. Deborah was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. She was also ordered to pay a substantial fine and to undergo mandatory drug counseling. The sentence, while less than the maximum possible penalty, was still a significant blow to Deborah. Her life, once defined by control and authority, was now irrevocably altered. She had lost her freedom, her reputation, and her place in the community. The HOA, eager to put the scandal behind them, held a special election to fill Deborah's vacant seat on the board. A new era dawned in Hawthorne Crest, one hopefully characterized by cooperation, respect, and a greater emphasis on neighborly harmony. For me, I was left to grapple with the aftermath of the ordeal, the emotional toll it had taken, and the profound realization that even in the most seemingly ordinary of settings, extraordinary events can unfold. With Deborah behind bars and the dust settling on the Hawthorne Crest scandal, a profound sense of relief washed over me. The anxiety that had been gnawing at me for days, the fear of not having my medication, the frustration of dealing with bureaucratic red tape, all of it began to dissipate. The DEA, after completing their investigation, returned the remaining medication from my original package. It was a bittersweet moment. On the one hand, I was grateful to have it back. On the other hand, seeing the tampered package served as a stark reminder of the lengths Deborah had gone to in her campaign of harassment. As I held the package in my hands, I couldn't help but reflect on the absurdity of the entire situation. A seemingly minor issue, a misdelivered package, had spiraled into a full-blown federal crime. It was almost comical, in a dark and twisted way. But beneath the absurdity lay a deeper, more troubling question. What had motivated Deborah to do this? What had driven her to risk her freedom, her reputation, and her entire life over a petty act of spite? I spent hours pondering this question, trying to understand Deborah's motivations. Was it simply a desire for control, a need to exert power over others? Or was there something more complex at play? With ChatGPT's help, I researched various psychological theories about personality disorders, power dynamics, and the motivations behind criminal behavior. I learned about narcissism, sociopathy, and the deep-seated insecurities that often drive people to act in destructive ways. While I couldn't diagnose Deborah from afar, I began to suspect that she was driven by a profound sense of inadequacy and a desperate need to feel important. her constant meddling in the affairs of others, her relentless enforcement of HOA rules, her attempts to control every aspect of life in Hawthorne Crest. It was all a manifestation of her deep-seated insecurities by exerting control over others. Deborah was able to feel a sense of power and importance that she lacked in her own life. Her actions, however misguided and destructive, were ultimately driven by a desperate desire to feel valued and respected. It was a tragic realization. Deborah, the HOA Karen, who had made my life a living hell, was not simply a villain. She was a flawed and damaged human being, driven by insecurities and a desperate need for control. As I reflected on the situation, I felt a pang of sympathy for Deborah. Her actions were reprehensible, and she deserved to be punished. But I also recognized that she was a victim of her own internal demons. I also felt a profound sense of gratitude for the role that ChatGPT had played in resolving the situation. Without its help, I might still be struggling to recover my medication, or worse, I might have been unable to bring Deborah to justice. ChatGPT had been my ally, my advisor, and my advocate. It had helped me navigate the complex legal system, gather evidence, and orchestrate the sting operation that had led to Deborah's arrest. But beyond its practical assistance, ChatGPT had also provided me with a sense of empowerment and control. It had helped me to feel like I was not alone in this fight, that I had a powerful ally on my side. As I looked to the future, I knew that I would never forget the lessons I had learned from this experience. I had learned about the power of technology, the importance of standing up for myself, and the need to recognize the humanity in even the most flawed and destructive individuals. And I knew that, with ChatGPT by my side, I was ready to face whatever challenges life might throw my way. The story of the HOA Karen and the diverted medication is, at its core, a testament to the power of AI. Without ChatGPT, I'm not sure how I would have navigated the complex web of bureaucracy, legal procedures, and neighborhood politics that ultimately led to Deborah's arrest. ChatGPT was more than just a tool. It was a partner, an advisor, and an advocate. It helped me to articulate my concerns, gather evidence, and develop a strategy for confronting Deborah and involving the authorities. It provided me with the knowledge and the confidence to stand up for myself and to fight for what was right. Its ability to synthesize information, generate persuasive arguments, and maintain a professional tone, even when I was feeling overwhelmed and anxious, was invaluable. It was like having a legal team, a PR firm, and a psychological counselor all rolled into one convenient AI package. But beyond its practical assistance, ChatGPT also raised some important ethical questions about the role of AI in our lives. As AI technology becomes more sophisticated and more accessible, it's important to consider the potential implications of relying on it to solve complex problems and to make important decisions. On the one hand, AI can be a powerful tool for good, helping us to navigate complex situations, advocate for ourselves, and achieve justice. In my case, ChatGPT helped me to expose a criminal and to protect my health and well-being. On the other hand, AI can also be used for nefarious purposes. It can be used to spread misinformation, to manipulate public opinion, and to automate tasks that were previously performed by humans. It's important to recognize that AI is just a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or for evil. It's up to us to ensure that AI is used in a responsible and ethical manner, and that it is not allowed to exacerbate existing inequalities or to undermine human autonomy. In my case, I believe that I used ChatGPT in a responsible and ethical manner. I used it to gather information, to develop a strategy, and to advocate for myself. But I always remained in control of the situation, and I always made my own decisions. I never blindly followed ChatGPT's advice, and I always exercised my own judgment. I recognized that ChatGPT was just a tool, and that it was up to me to use it in a way that was consistent with my values and my principles. As AI technology continues to evolve, it's important for us to have a thoughtful and informed conversation about the ethical implications of its use. We need to develop guidelines and regulations that will ensure that AI is used in a way that benefits society as a whole, and that it is not allowed to be used to exploit or harm individuals. The story of the HOA Karen and the diverted medication is a cautionary tale, but it's also a story of hope. It's a story about the power of technology, the importance of standing up for oneself, and the need to recognize the humanity in even the most flawed and destructive individuals. And it's a story about the potential for AI to be a force for good in the world, helping us to navigate complex situations, advocate for ourselves, and achieve justice, but only if we use it wisely.